welcome back to Identity Insights by Indicio. I'm your host, Tim Spring, and today I am joined by Sean Bohan, who's a community architect at the Hyperledger Foundation, and he's here to discuss Hyperledger with us. So thank you for joining us today, Sean. Would you mind telling us a bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Tim. I work at Hyperledger. We are a global nonprofit, and I can get into exactly what Hyperledger is a little bit later. My role is community architect. So my job is working with the community, the maintainers, the contributors, folks who are interested in contributing, folks who just want to find out more about what we're doing. That's kind of my role. In addition, we also set up workshops, seminars. We work with organizations like Indicio to both get the word out about the projects, but also to get more people working with the projects.
All right, perfect. Well, yeah, appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. Would you mind starting us off with a bit more on what the Hyperledger Foundation is and what its goals are?
Sure. So the Hyperledger Foundation is a community and member-driven nonprofit organization that fosters the global development of enterprise-grade open source blockchain and related technologies. We host the world's largest ecosystem focused on open development of these technologies, and the size and scale of our community and our commitment to collaboratively developing the foundational technologies for decentralized networks, transactions, and trust are what set us apart. We have 13 projects in graduated or incubating status, everything from Hyperledger Fabric and Sawtooth to Bezu, which works with Ethereum, to Firefly, Hyperledger Indy, and Aries, and Anon-Creds, along with some amazing projects like Cacti, which is all about interoperability, as well as a lot of labs, which are really sort of early stage projects that might find a contributor base and or something that can move to incubating status and then maybe to graduated status later on. But overall, our mission is to accelerate the development and deployment of Hyperledger technologies with the aim of transforming existing markets and creating new ones. And in a life, I worked in decentralized identity. We'll get to that a little bit later. But so that's identity is how I started and how I started working with Hyperledger. But really, we have a pretty broad focus across multiple use cases. Again, I mentioned before, 13 plus projects. So yeah.
And as a community architect, how do you really, interact with these groups, and what is your like day-to-day look like?
Yeah, I spend probably too much time on Discord. No, our community is pretty amazing, but we have to meet them where they are. So a lot of our chat and messaging and discussions happen on Discord, but we have some lively mailing lists, which is the only interaction point some folks have, as well as our wiki. So really the day-to-day, and I use this example in another call the other day, like our purpose is service. We work to help the projects, the maintainers, the contributors, the technical oversight committee, just the tire kickers and people who are interested in Hyperledger. Maybe they don't even know the Hyperledger projects, but they have a use case they want to try. Our goal, our mission is to make sure that they can find what they need, help them find the right folks. And in some cases, help them find the rabbit hole that they're going to dive down as they learn about a new project or they implement, full stack engineer doesn't know a lot about Bezu. We can help them find folks who can help them get on board and get moving. Overall, Hyperledger, our former ED used to call it permissionless innovation. We have some incredible projects and incredible community members and maintainers and contributors, and anybody can take the code of a Hyperledger project and run with it for whatever they want, which is both exciting and daunting because I find out routinely through Discord, like, hey, somebody's implementing an indie network in Cambodia. Like, cool, can you introduce me to them? That sounds amazing. Like, they haven't shown up on Discord yet, and maybe they don't need to because they've got, folks they're working with. So that's been kind of, that's the fun and sort of frustrating challenge of finding out people are using one of the projects and they didn't reach out to us. And how do we connect them into the folks? More importantly, tell their story. My experience within Hyperledger in the early days was really about, helping to find people who were implementing indie in different places, not with permission, but like, hey, you're doing something cool. You can teach all of us something that you found. And it's, we would love it if everybody who uses a Hyperledger project starts contributing and becomes a maintainer. That's one of the goals. But I think we're also just as excited when even if it's, a college student uses it for a class project. Like, that's awesome. And there's something that everybody can learn from it. And more importantly, in some cases, there's something the more experienced community members can teach. So connecting those dots is something that we do.
All right, very cool. No, it sounds both exciting and also very busy because I'm sure there's a ton of people out there using these projects and a lot of projects to kind of keep track of. So
the late night Discord conversations I have, yes, it is. We're a global organization, so we end up doing calls in every time zone. A lot of our members are U.S. and Europe, but we have tons of folks in Asia and Southeast Asia, and so it's a vibrant community and there's a lot going on. So it's a little daunting sometimes. We're a very small team, but it's pretty great.
absolutely. So I know, right? You mentioned there's like 13 projects that Hyperledger covers across all kinds of blockchains. Do you work mainly with identity? Do you work across all of those? How does that kind of work in terms of your focus?
Great question. My focus is across all the projects because I've got a ton of experience in identity. Formerly as a product manager, I'm not an engineer, but a ton of experience with identity and knowing a lot of folks in the space. All of your coworkers, I think I've worked with it back in the Evernym and Sovereign days. But because I have those relationships, a lot of the identity stuff I'm happy to take on just because I know the folks to call, or I know someone who knows someone. So, hey, someone's doing something really cool in Belgium. I don't know them, but I know two people in Holland who might be able to connect me. And that's usually how things work. It was a bit of a learning curve when I joined Hyperledger because all of my experience was previously in identity and big data. And while I knew folks who worked in Fabric and in Sawtooth, I wasn't as obviously, when all you do is Indy and Aries all day long, that's all you really spend time learning, and you meet folks at conferences and say hi. And moving from that sort of context to a much wider point of view was a bit of a learning curve when I started, but it's been pretty great.
All right. No, it sounds pretty awesome. And it sounds like at least there's probably people to help you along the way because it's such a big community. So
we have a fantastic staff and team. And one of the things that I, really love about Hyperledger in general is we have a very small to no number of jerks. Everyone's trying to get work done. And, it's funny when people are trying to get work done, the jerks tend to take a hike because they're not helping. They're not moving the ball down the field. People tend to really want to work with people and want to get things done. And more importantly, your day job depends on it in a lot of cases. So there's no time for, silly politics and stuff. So it's a really great community of nice folks. They were rather gentle when I joined, particularly in the projects that I don't have a lot of context with. So
yeah, very cool. Well, to pivot just slightly to how other people can get involved, right? You mentioned there's Discord. I know there's obviously hyperledger.com and stuff. How would you suggest, someone's just trying to get their toe in, maybe they don't know that much about the technology. How do you even get started with Hyperledger?
Have you been following me around Discord all day? Yes. So best way to do it. And we've got a couple of different constituent, I don't like the term audience, but users and community members. Some of them are coming from the business side and they're really interested in use cases, white papers, case studies, who's the right person doing X, Y, or Z in a given project or solution. And the other side are the engineers. In a lot of cases, engineers go right to GitHub, and that's their starting point, which is great because our GitHub is awesome. Our projects are really well maintained. They're with folks who care deeply about these projects, and they want to be open and they want to attract people to work on them. I don't think of anybody who's a maintainer or a contributor at Hyperledger is like, no, we don't need any help. Like everyone wants help, which is great. I would probably say whether you're a business or an engineer, the wiki is a great resource for a lot of things, whether it's the community calendar, where are the meetings happening? And the meetings are where we can all get together on Zoom. And instead of, I find email mailing lists to be hard sometimes because it's disconnected. It's out of band. It's not in real time. You get to sit in a Zoom with somebody and I can talk to Tim and we can get stuff done a lot quicker. It's not as good as meeting in person, but it's pretty darn close. In the case of the wiki, you've got the community calendar, you've got project pages, which link out to the GitHub, the docs, meeting recaps. We have our YouTube and the Hyperledger YouTube we've put a lot of work into in the last couple of years. We've got playlists for every single project. Most of the SIGs, special interest groups, we have playlists for, the identity SIG being one of them, which is awesome. And you can go back and I want to dive in and search identity SIG and EIDAS. We've got a couple of videos in there where you can see what was being talked about a couple of years ago, what was being talked a month ago, which is pretty great. So, and then you've got Discord, my favorite place in the world. We are working with the community to make sure the pinned message in any channel has some great like links. I call it the rabbit hole, but like here's starting points. If you don't know anything about Bezu, here are 4 places you can go to right now. And we're working really hard to make sure as many of our channels have that information as possible. Folks still go to general and they ask us about Fabric, and we point them to the right folks at Fabric. Or they say, hey, I'm looking for a job. I've got this kind of experience. Great. Looking for work is the channel for you. If it's something specific about a specific technology, we always put them, we try to route them to the right place or the right community. So, hey, I'm in Brazil. I want to get involved in Hyperledger. Awesome. We have a Brazil chapter and we have the LATAM chapter. And what are you interested in working on? And when someone is interested in a specific topic, we send them to the SIGs for the most part. We also, that's where we do a lot of the organization of our mentorship program, which is putting mentors together with mentees to work on very specific projects for the specific work on sub projects for the specific Hyperledger Foundation projects itself. So yeah, it's start with the wiki. If you're an engineer, you're going to start with GitHub anyway. You're going to ignore me, and then you'll go to the wiki, and then definitely come by Discord because that's where a lot of the in the moment conversations are happening. And as much as the Discord searches can sometimes be frustrating, it's pretty great if you know if you got a good handle on the keywords that you're looking for. You're going to find a thread of someone talking about this probably a day ago or a month ago or a year ago, which is awesome.
All right, very cool. So you mentioned, right, obviously there's a bunch of different projects and kind of almost not quite side projects, but right, based like tangential projects going on. How do you get a project of your own started? Do they pitch to someone like you? Do you just get some friends together or other interested people in the space? What does that process look like?
We actually have a process on the wiki for applying for a lab. And labs within Hyperledger are kind of the place to start. We have had other projects that are far more mature start out as incubating. Back in the dawn of time when I started working with Hyperledger in 2017, Indy was accepted as a full project, but we also had a full team working on it. We had a code base, we had QA, like there was a lot of energy behind it. So we weren't starting from scratch. But we have a process if you want to start from scratch to apply for a lab. We have lab stewards who are directly involved in the process. We can get folks set up and really working on something. We do have requirements. Like if you want to move into incubation, here are the things that need to happen. And we lay all that out on the wiki. Now, in the case of something like a non-creds, Hyperledger and non-creds was originally a component inside of Hyperledger Indy. And that community petitioned the technical oversight committee and said, hey, we've got a non-creds. We'd like to make it its own project. And they went through the application process and they were brought in as an incubating project as opposed to a lab because they were, well, actually, to be honest, they were pretty advanced. They were not incubating. They had active development. They had maintainers ready to go. They had a community of folks who'd raised their hand and said, hey, we want to be a part of this. So it was really easy to put them into incubation. There are a number of incubating projects right now that are getting ready to apply to move to graduated status. And we have a process for that. And that's all laid out on the wiki as well.
Okay. So just to clear it up for myself, it sounds like there's not quite a tier system because I'm sure you don't think of it this way. Right. So there's like the lab, then incubating, then full status project. Is that correct? And
that's one way.
What's like the main distinction factor for being in one of those? Just being young and like undeveloped, I would guess, as a lab.
Maturity. So there's maturity. Some of our labs are 2 people. Hey, I've got this idea, or my company told me we could open source this piece of code. We'd like to try it out. In some cases, we've taken a couple of labs and looked at them about merging them into an incubating project because they're doing something really interesting. The incubating project isn't doing that yet. We can make this work and grow that community, both by bringing people from the lab into the incubating project, but also letting the incubating project folks work on it. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say there's a hierarchy, but there's definitely a form of maturity. And that's probably the best way of looking at it. Obviously Fabric has more contributors than a smaller lab project. And whereas a non-creds is too big to be a lab and maybe not mature enough, but will be pretty soon to become a graduated project. And we're pretty excited for that.
Okay. And when you say graduated project, does that just mean that it's like basically fully ready? Like anyone can download, it's going to be fully working platform or whatever piece of code? What does graduated mean in this context?
Well, graduated is the status within the Hyperledger Foundation. So they've met certain gateways and requirements to gain graduated status. Right now, AnonCreds is production ready. It's in Indy in a lot of cases. I believe Animo and the team at Checked are implementing AnonCreds, or they were talking about implementing AnonCreds a few months ago within Checked, which is running on the Cosmos blockchain. So it's production ready software, but that community and the developers and the maintainers are basically getting to maturity to say that to getting to the point of being mature enough that we can move them into graduate status.
All right, very cool. So to pivot again, when you're pitching a project to Hyperledger, are there any benefits to joining? Right, obviously the community is massive, and you can try to get more people on your side. But is there any, what would you say is the biggest benefits of joining Hyperledger as a project, or joining Hyperledger to work on projects that are already housed there?
I would say, yeah, you kind of beat me to it with the community itself. Like, we've got a pretty incredible group of people, some of whom this is their day job, some of whom this is what they do after work, who are working on building and growing and scaling these individual projects. Identity, a thing you and I work on, or I've worked on in the past. This was a great sort of proving ground for the Indy and the Aries community to really grow and spread its wings and move from being untested software to stuff that's being deployed around the world. So when we think of membership is member in Hyperledger. There's a bunch of requirements for that. We've, again, the wiki and the website have lots of details around becoming a member, but just being a member of the community, anyone can do that. And we welcome everyone's contribution. When I worked at Mozilla had a lovely model of contribution. Some people contribute code, some people contribute bugs, but you know what? Going to a meetup and talking about being safe online is just as valuable. And teaching kids how to surf the internet safely and not give up personal data is just as valuable as writing code and contributing a bug report. And I think within Hyperledger, we're different. Firefox is consumer software. In a lot of cases, they've got some enterprise stuff, but Hyperledger is enterprise grade blockchain and tools. So we're a little different in sort of the categories that we're in, but still, if someone wants to contribute localizing documentation from English into, say, Portuguese, we would love the contribution. We would love their help. And by the way, we've got folks who are doing localization of content in other languages now, or working on what the policies are for how we change how we do documentation in the future. So if you've got an interest, we probably have somewhere for your interest that you can be a contributor to Hyperledger.
All right, very cool. No, I totally, particularly with the teaching kids to be safe online, I completely agree with that point as being very important, as the same as code. So it's...
And the thing is, in the Hyperledger context, I'm a product person. I'm not writing code. I might do some QA, but the reality is maybe my contribution is subject matter expertise in a topic like trade finance or climate and supply chain. We have a SIG about climate and supply chain. We have a trade finance SIG. There are lots of ways for somebody to contribute. You don't have to be an engineer. We love our engineers. We love our maintainers, but we also we're a pretty wide open community. And if folks want to do stuff, we probably have somewhere for you to participate.
Yeah, absolutely. What made Hyperledger take an interest in digital identity in the first place, if you know, and why kind of focus on it?
So 2015, Hyperledger was founded. And I'm going to work from my memory now what happened in 2017. But we were, the Evernym team, the company I worked for, we had built at the time, it was called the Sovereign Blockchain, but we built this blockchain SDK project. We were going to a lot of Hyperledger events. And, what became Hyperledger Indy, unlike Aroha, unlike Fabric, unlike Sawtooth, which are incredible projects that can apply to lots of different contexts. You can use Fabric for trade finance or CBDCs or supply chain or insurance. What separated Indy from those, what became Indy from those, was it was purpose built for identity. You really wouldn't use Indy to track conflict diamonds, and you wouldn't use Indy for something like CryptoKitties at the time were hot, but NFTs. Indy was related to identity and control and verifiable credentials, and someday DIDCOM, which is my favorite thing. But so there were a couple of large projects in 2017. The Hyperledger community was super open when we went to Hyperledger events about what we were working on. And the leadership, a couple of members of what was the technical steering committee at the time, the leadership at the Hyperledger Foundation said, maybe you should apply. We went through the application process. We were accepted, which was fantastic. It was my moving day. I know this because it was the last day the internet was on in my house, and I'm sitting on a bucket in a back room, like on the laptop, listening to the technical steering committee call. But yeah, so we had built a blockchain SDK. We had applied to Hyperledger to become a project along with Fabric and Sawtooth. And for a small startup at the time, that was an incredible achievement for us. Like our logo was up. I'm sorry, the Indie logo at the time was up there with Fabric and Sawtooth. Fabric, which was really powered by the team at IBM. Intel was deeply involved in Sawtooth, so we were pretty excited for that. Now Indie has gone from being Indie Node and Indie SDK to the Indie project, the Aries project, Ursa, which was a project for a number of years, and now Anoncreds. So that's how sort of, originally Hyperledger not Hyperledger got involved, but Hyperledger was interested in what we were doing. We were only working in decentralized identity. We had a pretty specific set of use cases. We couldn't be applied to everything else. And it was really exciting for us to join. And it was also, we went from being an open source project where everybody at the company was working on it to an open source project where we were getting folks from bc.gov, folks from Europe, the Findy folks out of Finland were taking a look at what we were doing. So it was really exciting to go from being this, we're open source, except I work with all these people, to, wow, we have these new community members and they're interested in what we're doing. And there's an identity working group at Hyperledger that we can connect into. And we were able to share what we were doing with other folks. So.
All right. No, that sounds super exciting, especially be on the cutting edge when it's still pretty new like that.
It was and a little daunting. I mean, Fabric was a huge team. They're still a huge team, and very mature. Like their docs were really good. I know we worked really hard on our docs to catch up and to if we couldn't compete with them on documentation, but we could at least make a good showing. And Misty and a couple other folks at Evernym at the time did an amazing job with their documentation. And it was, being part of the overall Hyperledger at the time, we were calling it Greenhouse, but part of this Hyperledger stack of technologies, we were pretty unique. Hey, what do I use for supply chain? Well, here are 3 options. What do I use for identity? Yes, you could do something with Fabric CA with identity, but Indie this is what we're purpose built for. This is what, built fit for purpose, is one of my colleagues from London used to call it. So it was pretty exciting.
No, absolutely. I think I would agree. And having that purpose-built one solution sounds like a nice, easy way to kind of explain to people, it's everything you need. I'm curious if you could explain a little bit to me and also the people at home. When approaching digital identity, there's obviously a bunch of different ways to do it. Why do you think decentralized is, kind of one of the better options for people out there?
I'm going to go. So I've been working in identity now for almost 17 years. It'll be 17 years in September. I know that because I found a calendar object from 2006 the other day. I'm like, oh, that was when I started working on this stuff. And I started working with Doc Searle's Project VRM out of the Harvard Berkman Center then. And it, that was on the periphery of identity. We needed strong digital identity to make VRM work. And one of the, from there I went to Mozilla, where I wasn't really working on identity, but I was working on user agency and giving the users more control over their digital life. And really control of your identity is a big part of that. And identity takes a lot of dimensions. There are tons of solutions. And I'm not going to say one is better than the other. I would say in a lot of cases, the status quo is pretty hard. I'm pretty sure lots of your audience have had some form of identity theft, which is super fun. Thanks. But when I joined Evernym, it wasn't just the team and the fact that we were doing it in open source. It was, and I specifically call this the superpowers that decentralized identity can give the user and the enterprise. It's not just superpowers for Tim and Sean, superpowers for my bank, who I would love if they knew it was only me every time I called, and they had a way of proving that with a did. Or superpowers between, myself and a family member. So they never have to worry, is that email really from Sean? Or is that email from someone, spoofing Sean's email address, asking me for my account number? Like I can do that with DigCom, which is my favorite thing. I'll just keep saying this until Sam Curran laughs out loud. But for me, the decentralized identity stuff was a pretty logical evolution from the digital world we have to the digital world we want. 2017 was super early. And in 2023, we are at scale in a lot of cases, and we are seeing decentralized identity objects being built in the wild, not just as tests and POCs and pilots, but actually being implemented. And we have the ARF coming out of the EU, which is exciting because that means the regulators are paying attention and getting involved, and that's where we want. But I've always seen digital identity, but specifically decentralized identity, as being about, where the user has more agency and control and privacy and correlation resistance. And more importantly, they become a peer. It's not just my bank having a relationship with me where they just do whatever they feel like, and I can, tap to change my password when they tell me. But I have a relationship with them where it levels the playing field, where I can cancel any did that I've got between myself and another organization. I can rotate the keys between myself and another organization if I think that device I have might be compromised, or I find out that, hey, my Gmail's been hacked. Okay, I can make a change under my control and affect the way the world treats me, as opposed to the current state of digital relationships where I'm a target, I'm a consumer. So decentralized identity for me means new capabilities. And those are also new capabilities for folks. I mentioned BC.gov before. I love that team, but they're not dealing with individuals. They're doing decentralized identity between the government and between businesses in the province. By the way, every business needs licensing and registrations and et cetera. And all of that is paperwork. And anyone who owns a small business has an entire folder and a fire safe somewhere full of stuff that if they lose, their life becomes incredibly difficult. All those can be verifiable credentials. All those communications could be secure through DIDCOM. So that was why I work in the space. It's why I think decentralized identity is so important. It's why I'm still excited about it. Because every year we're implementing it more. It's getting adopted more. I think this week on the Identity SIG meeting, we have Mobi, which is using decentralized identifiers in IoT, which is awesome because that's getting DIDs somewhere else. And by the way, those DIDs are going to be, the IoT system in my car should be owned by me. I should be the only one who has control of those DIDs. I can exchange that control with Tim when he buys my car. Now he has, but I don't have access anymore to that telematic system in the car. So that's the stuff I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't just from personal experience, I can't tell you. I've worked at several startups, and they don't always change the passwords or whatever. And maybe you still have access to the LinkedIn or whatever it is. It's a much cleaner way to handle it, I think, for sure.
Across the board, but even if it's just your bank knows you're you. Like, long story short, when I was working for Evernym, I was in Miami for a couple of months, and someone had tried to break into my bank account, and they had logged into my account 80 times in like 8 minutes. And that's how the bank knew something was up, and they closed my account. By the way, I'm not at home, and there's no bank branch in Miami. I'm sitting there going, okay, so what are we going to do about this, guys? But even then, like, had this world existed in 2018, my life would have been so much easier. First of all, there would have been a DID exchange when that person called the first time. And if that DID exchange failed, there would have been a red flag. We wouldn't have gotten to 80 calls hoping to get the one customer service person who was under caffeinated or didn't get any sleep last night because of a new baby or something. Like, so I was saved based on a system that wasn't using this technology, but not because that system was great or perfect, because brute force didn't work, and brute force could have worked. This world that we're working on with decentralized identity, it's not perfect. It's not going to solve every problem known to man, but it's going to solve some pretty dumb ones. And that's something I'm excited to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the perfect wording, is the dumb ones. 80 calls in 8 minutes or whatever is ridiculous. So we don't have a ton of time left, but before we go, I'm curious if there are any particularly interesting projects or use cases that you've found that have come up recently, and if you could talk about any examples of those.
Absolutely. So I think I'm pretty excited about a couple of things. Number one, I love seeing the non-creds community and how it's expanding and the work that's going into it, both from the code as well as the specifications. And that whole community is pulling in the same direction. It's really awesome to see. I'm really excited about the Indie Summit coming up in early September. It's coming up in a couple of weeks, September 7th, I believe. It's going to be this part two. The first Indie Summit was back in July. The second one's in September. And it's really a gathering of the clans by the indie community. Hyperledger, we're attending. Like I'm going because I'm in this community, but I'm psyched to see like the maintainers and the contributors are organizing it, and they're organizing the agenda, and they're talking about both, hey, here are the cool things that are happening, here are the hard decisions we need to make. So that's exciting. I think Lisi recently announced that they've incorporated DIDCOM into their wallet. So yay, Lisi. I think Animo is working on making Aries Framework JavaScript a global framework based on the European Union's ARF. I think that's going to be incredibly important work. And I think lastly, getting to work with Indicio more. We did a couple of great workshops last year on both building with Indy and building with Aries, as well as earlier this year, we had two great sessions with Morgan State University on, not like in-depth workshops, but really like, here is the business of decentralized identity for the business audience of those students. And then here are the technical underpinnings. And it's tough to work with a university because we want to meet the students where they are. And we can't, it's like getting you to leave class for 4 hours to do a Hyperledger workshop. You might watch it on YouTube, but you're not going to leave class for half a day. Whereas a business person might be able to. But getting to meet those students where they are in their context and like show them that there is this world of really important work happening that's not NFTs and, a cryptocurrency, but something that's really more fundamental. And by the way, can apply to almost anything. Like I've used this example on folks in the past. Identity applies to almost every use case. There is some form of identity, whether it's institutional, individual, access, authentication, and across, any industry. Everybody has an identity problem, and some are really small and some are massive, and some cost a lot of money, and some would save so much money they should be attacked right away. Fraud as the greatest example as we discussed earlier. So when I think about this stuff, those are probably the three. Working with Indicio was awesome because we did a couple of workshops. We're going to do some more in the future. We were also working on interoperability. So one of the big goals or objectives of the Hyperledger organization, just across the board, we started this last year with Cacti, incubating the Cacti project, which was combining both Weaver and Cactus as an working on interoperability across chains. We think that interoperability across identity systems is just as important. And interoperability starts with standards. It goes to open source. Things like decentralized identifiers out of the W3C that are going to work on a Cosmos ledger or on an Indy ledger or on a sovereign ledger or on somebody else's ledger or a ledgerless system are all really important. And we think probably, just me as an action item, focusing more on interop and how we tell that story and getting those stories out there is going to be really important because it's happening. It's happening right now. And as I mentioned before, no one's bothered to tell me, and that's okay. But if you hear about it, let me know. And I'd love to share that story with folks.
Absolutely. No, it looks like we're coming to the end of our time today. So if you at home are interested in learning more about verifiable credential technology, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. We'll try to keep you posted with updates from the community and more educational content. If you have any specific questions or topics that you'd like for us to cover, please go ahead and leave a comment below, and I'll be sure to readdress them. And thank you again to you, Sean. If someone was interested in learning more about either Hyperledger or just anything we've discussed today, where would you suggest they look for some more details?
I would start with wiki.hyperledger.org or hyperledger.org. And after this, I'll put together some links if you want to leave them in the show notes, Tim. So if folks want to dive in on like how do I join a meeting or how do I get onto the Discord, I'll get those links over for you.